Forgive me if I don't follow all your customs. I'm not used to being here. I actually have been here before. Some of you may even, I doubt it, you remember. I was the interim here briefly. There we go, back there. I see a familiar face. I was calculating this week. It was 40 years ago. That is really hard to believe, isn't it? Anyway, I was only here for 3 or 4 months, it was very short. Anyway, it's a long story and not a very enlightening one. But anyway, yeah, we were worshiping over where? It was over there in the original church at that time. I've been back here to supply once or twice since then, but that was before the pandemic. But anyway, it's nice to be here. Like I said earlier, I don't supply much anymore. Just physically not able to do it. And so we'll see today, okay? I'm doing this kind of as a last-minute favor. It's tough to be a Christian. And that's what the Gospel of Mark is all about today. It's tough to be a Christian. One of my favorite stories, among others, is highway patrolman was driving down the highway and a car in front of him which had bumper stickers all over it. Jesus saves, God is my co-pilot, you know all the ones you see. And there's nothing wrong with them, of course, they're fine. Anyway, he was following this driver with all these bumper stickers, and the driver was speeding, driving erratically, and blew a stop sign. So he, in cop terms, lit him up and pulled the driver over. Well, it was a woman. That's incidental in the story, actually. And he made her get out of the car, put her hands on the roof of the car, and leaned forward while he searched her. And she says, "You can't do this. This is just a traffic stop. Why are you treating me like this?" He says, "Well, I was looking at all your bumper stickers and the way you were driving. I presumed the car was stolen." It's tough. It's tough for me. It's tough for everybody, I presume, unless you're more blessed than I am with some virtues. Patience has always been an issue for me. And it's not a virtue, trust me, if you don't have it. So sometimes we act in ways that maybe not be consistent with the gospel. And then later you say, "Oh Lord, why did I do that?" Was I impatient with the grocery clerk who didn't work the way I thought he or she should? Or was I, very impatient with the driver, like the one I was following up here this morning. And I was thinking uncharitable thoughts about her. And, and I immediately said, "This is what your sermon is about, God, she was terrible. Anyway, but we struggle. We struggle to follow the gospel. And the thing that gets me, of course, and maybe most of you, I hope, is the hypocrisy that so much of the folks who claim to be Christians observe. On one hand, they proclaim a version of Christianity and then turn around and behave in the most appalling ways officially. Judgmental, condemning, isolation, shunning people who don't agree with them. Behaving in ways that are grossly immoral, and then turn around and talk about ethics. your head spins sometimes. At least mine does. We are living in a time of incredible news. There's an old Chinese curse that may you live in interesting times. Tolstoy made the comment that sometimes we live in decades in which nothing happens, and then we live in weeks in which decades happen. If you haven't been paying attention in the last month and a half, you know which one of those we're in. It seems like events happen almost daily rather than weekly. And you need to pay attention or you get lost. I'm the only person left, and I'm sure who still reads their news on the dead tree. I have the newspaper delivered every morning, which is getting to be very, very expensive, I might add. And I just never gotten the hang of this internet news thing. Anyway, I'm a news junkie, okay? And I'm a bit of a political junkie as well, and so I follow what's going on. And I went from the last couple of years of fighting depression. And one of my friends said, well, quit reading the news. Well, it was depressing. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of good news in there. And then it all changed. All kinds of things started happening. People started doing stuff that was more exciting and interesting and things you could approve of, and life got better. You know, when we observe the gospel and we live according to the gospel, life is always better. We may not always succeed totally, and probably won't. That's the sad, obvious part. That's why we have a prayer confession in the liturgy. It's there for a purpose. But we try. We try. And we try to avoid the blatant hypocrisy that's out there in the world. The hypocrisy we live with. The hypocrisy we see in my Dead Tree newspaper every morning when I read the newspaper. Shocking to hypocrisy. Sometimes you can't believe they even are saying that when they just said something else, you know. And none of it had anything to do with the gospel, trust me. But these are so-called Christians, okay? I'm not going to be judgmental when I talk about other people being judgmental. One of the reasons I became an Episcopalian, I'm a convert when I was in college, was because you were the most unjudgmental church I'd ever been around. Interesting, isn't it? This is the 1950s, folks. Yeah, we didn't recognize clergy from other churches, but that wasn't a judgmental decision. It was because they didn't follow the same rules that we did, and we didn't say they weren't ministers or what. We just said, well, no, you don't function with us because you don't have our sort of training and promises. That doesn't mean you're not a perfectly valid minister for your church. And, you know. And I was so impressed by that, having grown up in a more evangelical community which had opinions about everything. Mostly anything that was fun. You know, the definition of a conservative is someone who lays awake at night worrying that somewhere somebody's having a good time. Being a Christian's tough. And I'm not going to continue to talk because my doctor says, get your message out, shut up, and sit down.